Hey everyone, sorry for not recording. Been a little busy. All right, so up till chapter 10, recap. They went to a restaurant, some random dude got killed, they ended up in a parking lot, and we were introduced to Vale's late wife, Liliana. Chapter 10. Not a day goes by that I don't miss my Granny May. Mom, well, to be honest, I'm kind of relieved she's gone, but her mother's passing still gets to me, even after 3 years. Sometimes I want to see her so badly it's a physical pain. Now I just wish she was here to prop me up, because damned if I didn't feel dizzy. I watched Vale watch Liliana approach us, and totally failed to figure out how he felt about it. I, on the other hand, felt very clearly that the world had just begun to spin in the opposite direction. Your late wife? I whispered. There are two Lipsies. There are two Lipsies in that three-word sentence. Bill nodded, just a slight jerk of the head. She died. Then she killed me. Ergo, late wife. That song started going through my head, the only words I remembered being the most pertinent at the moment. How bizarre, how bizarre. Bill's voice sounded robotic, a programmed conversational gambit offering no meaningful detail as he said, "Whatever happens, Jasmine, do not take off Saralai." Who? Oh, duh, the ring. Still basically clueless, I fell back on what Granny May used to call my spider sense. Aunt May? Granny May? So clever. So clever. She was a big fan of Marvel Comics. Dave inherited her collection, The Lucky Bomb. She had met my women's intuition, and even without my newly honed senses to back it up, it thrummed like a tightly strung web. The rate of thrum increased when Vale added, "Under no circumstances should you draw your gun." Grief, a comforting lump under my jacket, contained some Bergman-engineered options that would work beautifully on Liliana, and he didn't want me to pull it? Nuts. Vale. His look, foreign and glacial, silenced me. I suddenly felt outnumbered. "This is not something we can escape through violence," he said, thawing slightly as I searched his eyes. "What about through the threat of violence?" His lips twitched. Okay, I don't understand when people say his lips twitched. What does that mean? I mean, do you guys walk around in the streets with people who kind of sort of not smile, but their lips twitch that they might smile? Like, I think that might be a problem. One cannot encounter you without sensing that threat. Tonight, it should be enough simply for them to know you are dangerous. I disagreed. I hated to question Vale's commitment to me or to the agency, but he's just dropped a big old bomb on me. What else had he been hiding? Should I, God forbid, mark his name down next to Martha's on the suspect list? I felt like I was looking at a portrait as I gazed into his empty eyes. I'd seen life in them plenty of times, but now I felt stupid to have assumed his life had anything in common with my own. He wasn't a monster. I'd seen enough in my time to recognize the difference. But he wasn't a man either. Well, obviously. Could I ever really know? Could I ever really trust someone so different from me and mine? Bill and I stood staring at each other, teetering at either end of a finely balanced lever. Should I step off? Would he? "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That you're up to no good," I sighed. I hope Granny May was right. About what? About trusting my intuition. Grannies are generally very wise in these matters. Yeah, but mine never met a vampire. Liliana strode forward, clearly put out that we hadn't unrolled the red carpet for her dramatic entrance. I gave her a look meant to be blank. "Your kitten is bristling," Liliana told Vale. "I would not push her," Vale replied, leaning just slightly on his cane. "Many before you have found her to be more a tigress than a kitten." "Whatever happened to, 'Hey, how are you? Long time no see'? Apparently you don't have to observe the rules of etiquette when reuniting with a murderous spouse." "How did you find me?" Vale asked, his voice absolutely even. I took my eyes off the bad boys for just a moment to confirm what I had sensed shaking underneath that husky baritone. Yeah, it was there, in small movements most wouldn't notice. A lift of the shoulder, a jerk of the head, the hollowing of a cheek that said he was biting the inside of his mouth. Vale was fighting enormous rage, something so big that if he released it, he might never get it all back in that box. Are you guys scared? Oh boy, I'm in smartass mode, and Vale wants to break his ex's neck. If we don't play this right, they'll be scraping parts of us off the bumpers of these cars for days. Liliana flipped a chunk of her long polyester hair back over one shoulder. These surroundings are rather public, don't you think? The smile she gave Vale could have cured frostbite. Come into my car. It wasn't a request. Vale gaze cut her like an arctic wind. No, I owe you nothing. She moved so fast her arm was a blur. Vale caught it just before her hand connected with his jaw. Back off, bitch, I snarled. With no time to draw grief, I'd resorted to my primary backup, a wrist sheath loaded with a syringe. The needle was halfway into her hip before she could look down to see what was pinching. A series of mechanical clacks drew my attention to Liliana's goons. Chinese dude had added a sawed-off shotgun to his arsenal, pulling it out from behind his long black coat like a Matrix groupie. The tattooed wonder and his buddies had their guns locked and loaded and trained on us as well. What is in that syringe? Liliana demanded. Slow, painful death by the way of holy water, Bill told her. My men can kill her before she depresses it. Then I will finish what she has begun, but perhaps you would prefer to talk? Liliana responded with a pretty little pout. I was sure she'd practiced in a mirror before she'd gone out for the evening. All right, then, she said. You always did like to have things your way. By mutual unspoken agreement, I withdrew the needle and Vale pushed her away. The goons let the barrels drop. Oh, the tension. Is that really how you remember our lives together? Vale asked grimly. Because I have scars to prove otherwise. Good God, had Liliana inflicted those marks on Vale's back? You earned every one of them, she said viciously, looking as if she'd like to hit him again. Maybe. For a fleeting moment, Vale's guard fell. His expression became as bleak as a dying man's. Then it was gone, replaced by cold, hard hate. Who told you I was here? Why, Vale? It's not like I've been looking for you for the last 200 years. I could have found you any time I wanted. He shook his head, his eyes so dark you could imagine walking right through them and emerging in a whole new universe. Not true. Someone tipped you off about my whereabouts. She tilted her head, her hair forming a little river of silver behind her. What makes you so sure I was looking for you? But I did get your attention, yes? You enjoyed my show? She inclined her head toward the restaurant. I thought you would appreciate the irony of two sons losing their father. Vale's power spiked and the temperature in the immediate area plummeted, but he didn't reply. If he'd tried, he probably would have spit sleet in her face. You must admit I have improved over the centuries, Liliana went on. Once I would have had to sink my fangs into him to kill him. Now it only takes a scratch. She slid her fingernail against her creamy white forearm to demonstrate. A thin line of blood rose from the wound she'd opened. And the best part is, I can draw that death out as long as I wish. Vale stared at the blood on Liliana's arm as she pulled her hands apart as if stretching time. His hand convulsed on the head of his cane as she clenched her fists. Did he imagine poor Charlie's heart squeezing under those lethal nails? She stepped closer. Do not let her touch you, Jasmine, Vale commanded. Just a drop of her blood mixed with yours will kill you. Liliana recycled a pout. Only if I want to. She gave me a look I recognized right away. It was Tammy Shobson, the sequel. I half expected her to kick me in the shin and call me a sissy pants crybaby. Her psychic scent hit me again, and the stench of death and decay backed me up a step. My dear, there is no need to be afraid. I won't hurt you too much. She darted a flirty little smile at Vale, but he lost his appreciation for cool humor, and apparently she blamed me for that. When she met my eyes again, I felt like that poor goat they'd set out to bait the Tyrannosaurus Rex in Jurassic Park. And that's when she saw my bandage. Her eyes narrowed instantly. My hand flew upward, a protective gesture I couldn't seem to shake. Her gaze moved to Sarai. Vale, she said, her voice sort of hollow-sounding, as if she was speaking from the bottom of a well. Why is this? She made an I've just seen a cockroach face. Eichfin? Wearing your ring, and her neck. Have you marked her as well? I didn't like the word marked. It sounded too much like a dog raising his leg on his favorite hydrant. She's my avar, said Vale. It took all my self-control not to turn to him and say, You're who? I've never heard the word before. No, wait, Bill had whispered it to me last night as he left my room. It hadn't registered then, but now I knew it meant something significant because the news hit Liliana like a wrecking ball. Sorry, I just thought of Miley Cyrus. She lapsed into steaming silence, made a dismissing motion with her hand, and the four stooges backed up. Though I was relieved she'd elected to delay the war, I suspected she still meant to wound us. And like most homicidal maniacs, she followed the profile to the letter. Has Bill fulfilled his end of the bargain? Liliana asked me, her voice as sweet as powdered sugar. She took my silence for the answer she wanted and went on. An Avar carries a great burden and responsibility, she told me. Therefore, she also receives certain privileges, one of those being the right to know every detail of her Severhamin's past. My what? I darted a look at Vale. You've got some explaining to do, buddy. Liliana, Vale growled, the panther prepared to pounce. So I just wondered if Vale has told you about his sons, our sons, and how he killed them. Enough! Vale's voice rang with power. Somewhere nearby, a meteorologist had flipped out because the temperature had just plunged from 59 to oh crap, cover the oranges. I shivered as frost covered my eyelashes and my lungs filled with winter. Liliana's gunmen, not being sensitives, weren't faring nearly as well. They blew into their hands and stomped their feet, and I heard the tattooed wonder say, I can't feel my nose. You four, Bill barked, get into the car. They snapped to attention, did a quick about-face, and marched right into the limo. And you, he regarded his former wife like a mongoose facing a cobra, get out of my sight for good this time. She bared her fangs and hissed at him, a fairly hilarious reaction in any other circumstance. I would offer you an alliance with the most powerful vampire on earth, but you, with your human avar, do not deserve to kiss the hem of the raptor's robes. Son of a bitch, she's working for the raptor. My instinct was to take her down, and I already hated her enough to feel a charge, but I hadn't done more than a twitch before Vale set his cane across my path. Nuts! It's so tense, guys. I'm at the edge of the seat. I do not believe this is over, Liliana warned. You cannot guard her every moment. You cannot see in every direction at once. I will only have to wait until you blink. Harm one hair on her head, and I will burn that laughable wig off yours, with your head still on it. I felt a certain urge to applaud as Liliana muttered an insult I couldn't quite translate, my Romanian being limited to yes, no, and where's the bathroom. But to my surprise, she did retreat to the limo. The door slammed shut and it pulled away. So, I said, we're just letting them leave? Vale headed for the Mercedes. No, we are letting them think we let them leave. Come. We hurried to our car and pulled into traffic, a comfortable distance behind the limo. Ordinarily, this would be an easy tale, considering the make of their ride. But inside our Mercedes, the atmosphere was far from relaxed. Finally, Vale said, I do owe you an explanation. Damn straight. But suddenly, I'm not sure I'm ready for one. For now, just tell me what I need to know to survive this mission. You can save the rest for the plane ride back. We smiled at each other. At this rate, we'll have to fly to Ohio by way of Portugal. Our shared laughter eased the tension, and by the time Vale spoke again, he sounded more like himself. I think, first of all, we must consider that you may have been the target of these attacks all along. I'll buy the guard's arm attempt, I said, but why would they expose you to snake venom and poison your blood? Think about it. They did put me in a vulnerable position, one in which you insisted that I take your blood to sustain me. Most vampires would have drained you. Yeah, but you didn't hurt me. Vale stopped me with the irritable shake of his head. You are still looking at it like a human being. Look at it from a vampire's perspective. Vale stopped, stared hard out the window. By the time he met my eyes again, I knew we made the same leap as we chorused. The senator is a vampire. Okay. I guess we'll move on to chapter 11 then. I don't think it seems that long. Alright. This was so, It makes perfect sense, Bill rushed on as I tried to gather my scattered thoughts enough to keep us from crashing into the nearest electric pole. A vampire would know that, when faced with a deepening hunger, I would turn to the nearest possible source of nourishment. You make me sound like a granola ball. Hasmina... Sorry, I've been saying Jasmine. I need to go back to how he says it. I'm joking. I know it wasn't like that. Go on. Most vampires, at least the ones who scoff at the idea of assimilation, would have drained you without hesitation. This one is, I believe, no exception. So do you think Liliana's alliance offer is related to the attempts on my life? Vil shrugged. It's hard to say, especially now that she has her own reasons for wanting you dead. He looked at me with regret. I'm sorry. She bloodies everything she touches. I never meant for her to know you. Or for me to know about her? I shrugged. I'd come to realize it was none of my business, especially since I was keeping some serious information from him, too. So are we really saying that one of the senators on our oversight committee is a vamp who's gunning for me? I mean, that's where we're going with this, right? I saw Martha right before she left. She was still human then. Bill nodded. And still is, I will wager. But that does not clear her. It only makes her a potential partner or patsy of the senator. A senator, though? Are we sure we're sober? Remember I told you at the beginning that something seemed off about this mission? Yeah. The committee was supposed to meet with us before we left. They called it 6-month review. Despite Pete's reassurances that he and I were happy with your performance, they wanted to ask you a whole slew of questions. Something about making sure we made the right decision. The specter of my past lifted its raggedy head and cackled. The thought that it might always haunt me made me feel. The thought that it might always haunt me felt wretched. That's a really bad sentence, you guys. I wanted to crawl into the nearest bed and burrow under the covers until I was just a lump. Nobody expects anything of lumps. It could have been a peaceful existence, unless you've eaten chili, and I like chili. Never mind. What? Bill went on. Then, without warning, the senators canceled this interview. They said this new mission was much too urgent to put off any longer, although when I discussed it with Pete, he made no mention of the need to rush. So what are you getting at? I asked. If the interview had taken place, the undead politician would have been forced to attend. You are sensitive. As soon as he entered the room, you would have pegged the vampire. A vampire senator. I shook my head. Scary. But how did they figure to pull it off? People in Washington get kind of suspicious when you only come out at night. Bill shrugged. Technology has befriended the human race. I imagine there are times when it smiles kindly on vampires as well. Well, maybe. Or maybe our senator had a double. Public figures have done the same throughout history. Or maybe he or she was so newly turned and this plan so quickly hatched that he or she could go a couple of weeks in the dark without raising suspicion. Bottom line, our senator had found a way in. I said, okay, so at this point we have a dirty plastic surgeon with terrorist ties allied with a most wanted vampire allied with a senator, all of them working under the auspices of the Raptor, who seems interested in offering you access to a plot that involves a big scary virus. A thought occurred to me. The Raptor's got to know how long you've been with the agency. Why would he expect you to suddenly change allegiances? His perspective can never be considered unless you include a mind-numbing dose of power. I would assume he feels that he has a better deal to offer me, one in which I would find myself at a great advantage to my present position. I didn't understand the expression Vale made next, though Insect told me it was in response to something that had happened in the past. He cannot fathom a vampire who would willingly distance himself from the treasures he offers. He spat the word treasures like it tasted vile. We both fell silent, thinking about the Raptor, a vampire who had become the nemesis of every government of every developed country in the world. Guess all them other countries don't count. Oh, God. If we could get to him, on our terms, not his, to say the safety and civility of the world would increase exponentially would not be an overstatement. The limo ahead of us slowed, searching for parking. It had led us to South Beach, where the pretty people met to party. I'm going to say party, because bars, restaurants, 2 theaters, and a comedy club, all dressed up in Art Deco and neon, shared the neighborhood with the establishment in front of which the limo stopped. The place resembled a J.C.'s haunted house, from the rocking tombstone that spelled out Club Undead on the fake granite facade, to the glowing skeleton that hung from the second-story balcony, to the green lights that outlined the entire building. Despite the fact that many party hounds still sat at home whimpering into their doggy pillows, a steady stream of handsome men, beautiful women, and gorgeous men. Oh, I'm sorry. Despite the fact that many party hounds still sat at home whimpering into their doggy pillows, a steady stream of handsome men, beautiful women, and gorgeous men dressed as women moved up and down the sidewalk. Braving the unseasonal chill, even more revelers sat together at the tables that lined the walk, enjoying the company, the booze, and the cheerful glow that came from twinkle lights lining lining the frames of their patio umbrellas. Lucky for us, Liliana and her goons had to wait in line before Club Undead's bouncer, a 21st century version of Frankenstein, let them in. They gave us the slack we needed to secure a parking space in an open lot just down the street. We left the car and joined the crowd, sauntering as close to the club as we dared before finding a spot in a darkened doorway behind a closed deli, making like cuddling lovers. I stood in the circle of Vale's arms, fighting distraction. This whole new spectrum of color had opened up to me, but I couldn't relish it. I felt like a security guard at the Louvre, forced to watch the potential thieves when I just wanted to stare at the Mona Lisa. As it happened, the lovely little side effect was just the first in a series of brushstrokes that would eventually reveal an entirely new picture to me. The second had just begun to show its shadow, a creeping feeling of immense imbalance, when Vale interrupted my inner inventory. There is something else you need to know. His voice rang loud, almost strident in my ear. I did not kill my sons. Do I look that gullible? I asked. Jeez, Vale, I don't believe half the things you say, and I trust you. I didn't realize he was holding himself rigid until he sighed and slept against the wall at his back. Hours passed as we kept silent and watched. People came and went, none of them of special interest to us. Finally, Vale began to speak. I was nearly 40, he said quietly, his chin just level with my nose. My boys were almost grown. Hansi was 15, his brother Badu was 13. Vale spoke their names as if they were holy. Liliana gave me 5 children altogether, but Hansi and Badu were the only ones who survived infancy, and so we spoiled them. He lapsed into silence. I felt my heart break a little just for the couple he and Liliana had been, desperately sad for their lost children, desperate to make sure their living children survived. Something near the apex of my aching ribs started to quiver. I felt like I was about to get a really grim phone call, and though Vale was laying out the story of his tragic life for me because some warped vampire rule and said I deserved to know, I knew the feeling wasn't coming from him. They grew wild right in front of my eyes, he continued, and by the time I mustered the courage to tame them, it was already too late. They went from teasing dogs with sticks to breaking windows with stones. When they drove into camp one afternoon in a wagon they had stolen, I snapped. I raged at them. I whipped at them. I forced them to return the wagon with their apologies. The modern girl in me thought, Bill's family was camping? What, were they trying to save on hotel bills? The next thought, riding a sea of embarrassment, washed over me with the speed of tidal waves. They were gypsies. What happened? He asked. The farmer they had stolen from shot them before they could have a chance to explain. Oh, Vale. I held him tight, not just because my heart bled for him. The feeling of wrongness had intensified. The little girl in me instantly needed a teddy bear. That's awful, I murmured. Phil made a sound in the back of his throat, a primal distress signal, the kind you hear from elephants as they mourn over the bones of their lost brothers. I wanted to kill the man because I could not kill myself. I blamed him completely. I heaped my own weakness and self-hatred upon him until just shooting him was not enough. I wanted him to die slowly, over days, even weeks if possible. I wanted him to sink into horrors as if it were quicksand. Did the Roma have guns back in the 1700s? Is that normal? Sorry, my history is lacking at the moment. What? I swallowed, sick with this nameless feeling of dread, appalled by Vale's story. What did you do? I became the horror. His voice dropped to a whisper. It was so easy. My family, he frowned. My father, my grandparents. You have discerned by now that they held certain powers? I nodded, steadily warming my finger like a living thing. Though I never felt the call to take part in their rituals, I had watched them work all my life, lifting curses, saving souls. Now I simply did the opposite. How? I took 3 wooden crosses, profaned by the blood of murdered men, my own sons, in fact. I set them in a triangle and stepped into its center. I called upon the unholy spirits to send me a vampire. And they answered my plea, but they made sure he met my wife first. I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago, lifetimes ago. There's no need for you to be sorry. Well, I am, but that's not what I'm talking about. What then? I'm sorry. I have to stop you telling a story that was so hard to start, but we have to go, now. I grabbed his hand and pulled him out of the shadows, onto a sidewalk lit by street lamps and some other source my new vision appreciated but couldn't pinpoint. I led him to the corner where we stood facing a stoplight, the music from a heavy metal band blaring? through the walls of the bar behind us. "What is it?" Bill asked as we waited for traffic to clear. Hard to describe. I squeezed his hand, trying to stay calm, to separate new shades of neon and the screaming street music from the barely leashed panic that made me feel like jumping out of my skin. "That song," I finally said, by Leonard Skinner. "Remember the words, 'Ooh, that smell'?" "Yes," Bill said quietly, his eyes darting around the street, fixing every person, every street sign, and parked bench in his mind. "That's it. I'm smelling that smell, the slow descent into misery and helplessness. And on top of that, the scent of vampires. Something foul is going on behind Club Undead, and I'm afraid to go look." But when the light changed, we moved. Halfway to an alley that festered like an infected sore behind all those festive lights and decorations, I began to cough. The closer we got, the more the coughing turned to gagging. By the time we reached the first dumpster, I felt like someone had locked me in a hot car with a rotting carcass. I puked beside a trio of dented silver trash cans and wished to God Umberto's had shut down before I had the chance to eat an entire plate full of their spaghetti. I squeezed my eyes shut, more a reflex of the upchuck than a need to see in the dark, and when I opened them the alley glowed not just green now, but muted yellow and blood red as well. God, what is happening to me? I stood up, Bill studying me as I looked around. Small piles of garbage huddled next to overflowing dumpsters like a bunch of freshmen who hadn't made the dance squad. Potholes full of greasy water marked a path down the alley onto a staggering drunk. Potholes of greasy water marked a path down the alley only a staggering drunk could have followed. A couple of three-legged chairs leaned against a brick wall under a rusty fire escape, and in the middle of it all stood a vampire who must have spent part of his past battling Neanderthals and wrestling mammoths. Long dark hair and a full beard hid most of his features. His mountainous frame blocked 90% of my view of the alley behind him, but the man laying at his booted feet showed up fine. Another vamp knelt beside the prone man, gripping the edges of his torn shirt as she pulled him towards her bared fangs. I blew out a disappointed breath when I realized her hair was short and curly and real, not Liliana after all. The moment stretched into another plane, where time froze as we all tried to plan our next move. My attention riveted on the downed man, whose slow, blinking, unfocused eyes and blood-soaked collar bore witness to the attack he'd just survived. Oh, that smell. I looked at him closely, trying to pinpoint the source of his scent. The mountain man saw us and started speaking in Russian. The tone was wary, but not yet warning. For all he knew, Bale had simply decided to duck out of the club for a midnight snack. As Bale answered, I tried to unravel the mystery of this pitiful human lying on the garbage-lined pavement 1 block from where Miami's beautiful people met to play. In the words of Granny Mae, he wasn't right. Standing this close to him felt like wading through swamp water. If you could distill the scent of maggots and manure, you might come close to his aroma. But it wasn't body odor or bad breath. The man definitely bathed and scoped on a regular basis. In fact, for somebody whose pallor reminded me of a mortician with mono, the guy looked remarkable, a male model who'd made one too many rounds to the express elevator. The smell of dust surrounds you. His lips moved, though no sound escaped. He mouthed the word "save me," then slumped into unconsciousness. I drew my gun, my forefinger lingering on what I called, to Bergman's delight, the magic button. "I'll take the girl," I said, mostly because she looked like a runner, and I was highly motivated to put some distance between myself and the man she'd bitten. With my free hand, I transferred the car keys from my pocket to Vale's. "Do me a favor. When you're finished, take the guy to the hospital. If I had to do it, I think my head would explode." Dale nodded, taking all his weight off his cane as he and Matt and men sized each other up. I pressed the magic button, and a mechanical roar signaled my Walther's transformation. The top quarter of the barrel opened to reveal a sheaf of thin wooden bolts no wider than a shish kebab skewer. Metal wings snapped open from each side of the barrel, the action also dropping a bolt into the chamber and cocking the metallic bow strung that Metal wings snapped open from each side of the barrel, the action also dropping a bolt into the chamber and cocking the metallic bowstring that could send it flying nearly as fast and true as a bullet. Vampirella gaped at me as I raised my weapon. She said, "You would not dare." "Yes," I said, "I would. I have done nothing wrong. I have a right to feed," she responded, her voice shrill. She sprang to her feet, pulling the man up with her. He blinked, tried to focus, gave up, and passed out again. The blood stain on his shirt spread as the wound on his neck began to bleed. My hand started to shake as his scent rolled over me. "You have no rights," I told her, trying trying desperately to dodge a wave of nausea. It hit me anyway, and the effort it took not to gag brought tears to my eyes. I blinked away, talking fast, aiming high. On the other hand, I have several, including the right to shoot vampires with an unwilling donor's blood on their fangs. Screaming with frustration, she picked up the man and threw him at me. Heavy as a side of beef, he hit me hard, and I went down under him, feeling like I'd fall forever, knowing there was no escape, the living death that oozed over me like a flood of yellow pus. I yelled and flailed at the inert weight holding me down, as panicked as if I was truly drowning. The blackness came in a buzzing rush, and for the first time I reached out to it, thankfully, ready to embrace it. Then the man's weight left me. I breathed fresh air tinged with the ice of Vale's power. The man lay in a crumpled heap 20 feet away. Vale stood over me, slashing at the male vamp with his cane. I looked for the female, trying to force my brain into motion. Vale moved and I sat up, feeling stupid and stunned. I retrieved grief from where I had fallen beside me. I stumbled off in the direction she must have taken, only years of training keeping me on my feet. I heard a door click shut. Nothing was automatic. I had to tell my body to move toward the door. I concentrated on the handle, ordered my fingers to wrap around it and pull. Inside, the thick, hot air pulsed to the beat of Latin dance music. The door snapped shut behind me and I sprang forward, the sudden rush of energy that replaced the nausea propelling me into the dancing crowd. I slid the hand holding grief inside my pocket and followed the wake my quarry's passage had created. Winding my way through pale young thrill-seekers and their immortal lovers, feeling myself come alive again. I could hardly tell the real vamps from the pretenders, and plenty of both filled all 3 tiers of Club Undead's multicolored dance floor. Leash power sizzled and popped like cooking bacon, and I knew more than one of these bored rich kids would get burned straight tonight. In fact, one already had. He probably still lay in the alley like an abandoned lounge chair. Who was he? What god-awful horror crawled through his veins, exuding a stench that could knock me out like a glass-jawed boxer? Could cancer have sunk its claws into him? I didn't think so. Hundreds of people had crossed my path tonight. Some of them must be fighting the big C, but they hadn't showed up on my radar. I locked the mystery of the man's existence and the effort he had on me in a mental cabinet so it wouldn't distract me as I moved toward the door. I spotted Liliana and her goons, though none of them saw me, and I saw Asan talking to his vampire accomplice, Aiden Strait. They stood at the bottom of an ornate wrought iron staircase, drinking and laughing, looking like they just figured out a foolproof way to rip off Fort Knox. I slid past them all without alerting them to my presence and followed Vampirella out the front door. Frankenstein met me just outside. "Hey," he bellowed as I tried to push past. "I don't remember letting you in." "You don't smell like Frankenstein at all," I said, as I pulled out Grief, shoved it against his chest, and fired. "You smell like Dracula." A new wave of nausea hit me, but not as hard as before. Lucky for me, my gal's trail led away from Nightmare Alley. I followed her at speed, hoping for an open shot, finding none. After running hard for several blocks, dodging partiers and pedestrians, she surprised me by stopping suddenly. She stood outside a lamp store, the light from the front windows throwing sparkling highlights into her hair. Like an A-list actress, she oozed confidence. Somewhere between here and the alley, she pulled herself together, and the realization stopped me in my tracks. She smiled, and I liked her immediately. Her charm could melt glaciers. She might actually be the cause of global warming. I smiled back. How could I resist? Though the spike in her power told me her charisma ran on batteries, I lowered Reef, resisting the urge to drop it. "That man back there, with the blood on his shirt, who is he?" I asked, wishing I dressed as stylishly as this beauty with her knee-length boots, short denim skirt, and silky red blouse. "He's a friend of mine," she replied. "His name is Derek Steele." I nodded. "He's very sick, you know, probably dying." Her smile wavered, seeming to shrink along with the rest of her. "Bad blood," she whispered. "Aiden, you son of a bitch, what have you done to me?" Now I knew where I'd seen her. She'd been the small half of the couple on last night's helicopter. Aiden had called her Svetlana. I should have recognized her in Mountain Man right away. I could blame my lapse on Derek Steele's sickening effect on me, but excuses are for wimps. I really should have noticed. Between this, the wrecked Lexus, and the impulsive kiss, I might have just struck out, and I didn't even have a free afternoon to wallow in self-pity. At least I had my new friend. I said, "I thought all vamps could smell bad, bud." "Not me, not Boris," she said bitterly. "So Aiden set you up, huh? You must be part of his final experiment. But it'll make you sick, right? I mean, ultimately you should be fine." I wanted her to feel better. Think about it logically. You must mean something to Aiden. He wouldn't bring you all the way here to kill you. No, that is not why we came. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she worked it out. The raptor brought us here to propose an alliance between his trust and ours. He is becoming such a powerful force we had no choice but to come, to listen. Her eyes begged me to understand, and of course I did. Who wouldn't? But we could not agree to his terms, she went on. Terms? I asked, feeling apologetic for interrupting her train of thought, but I really needed to know. Alliance? I don't get it. What do you have that could possibly interest him? She shrugged and said simply, Moscow. Oh. She went on, We were fools to think he would let us sleep peacefully. Edward must have burned inside that Boris. I rejected. Oh. What? Edward must have burned inside that Boris, and I rejected his proposals, but he never showed it, not once. The raptor's name is Edward, I asked. She nodded. Edward Samos. Bingo. And he's in Miami? No, we met him on his jet. He flew out as soon as our negotiations ended. Do you know where he's headquartered? No. Well, Edward sounds like a real shit, I offered. Her head jerked in agreement. I need a Navarre, she whispered. There was that word again. I had some idea what it meant, but maybe she could give me some clarification. What would a Navarre do for you? I asked. Her smile returned, switched to high beam, her fangs making her look more deadly than pissed-off biker chick. She would be a dearly loved companion, Vampirella explained. She would watch over me should I fall ill and protect me, perhaps even for myself. She took a step toward me. You could be my Navarre. I feel so close to you already. What a sweet thing to say. I waved my hand in front of my face, as if the slight breeze could hold back tears. I'm so flattered, I said, feeling like I just won the Congressional Medal of Honor, also feeling her power pulse against my skin like a warm waterfall. But I don't think I would do you much good. Oh? She cocked her head sideways, her dimples making her resemble a tree sprite. And why is that? Because I can't be trusted. See, I feel so close to you, like we're best friends, but last year my best friend was killed by a vampire. In fact, I thought she was fully dead until she came to visit me 3 nights after her funeral, and though I loved her like a sister, and though I was strangely happy to see her, I made her a promise before she turned, one I couldn't bring myself to break. I raised grief and took aim, which is why I killed her anyway. I shot Vampirella through the heart before she could move, and as I watched the breeze disperse her remains, I whispered, and that's what I couldn't tell Cole, why David can't bear the sight of me, why my brain sometimes gets stuck on replay. With friends like mine, there's no need for enemies. So she killed her best friend when she became a vampire. Just to clarify, just in case you missed it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this.